Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining this amazing event set up by STEMi Africa makers. My name is Dr. Tana Joseph, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about opportunities for scientists in Africa and for African scientists. In this talk, I just want to say that obviously I can't cover every single opportunity, but hopefully this will be a useful guide for you to be able to get started and know where to look for resources and how to look for resources. So let me just share my video and then we can get started. Just 1 second. So I'll just get started and just say a bit about me. So my name is Dr. Tana Joseph, as I said, and I'm an astronomer. And I just want to give a bit of background about what astronomy is and also who I am and how I came to be an astronomer. So let me just see. I'm so sorry. I had my thing sharing and now I can't find it again. Share screen. It's not letting me share screen. This is really annoying, sorry. Anyway, I will get started and we can upload this video and I can upload my, my talk to you as well. So let's get started. So what is astronomy? Astronomy is when you study the universe and the objects inside it, like stars, galaxies, comets, asteroids, clouds of gas, moons, and so on, and you use telescopes and detectors that measure light, particles, waves, and even space debris coming from these objects so that you can learn about how they form, how they grow, how they change, and also the physics behind it. So astronomers don't go into space. We're not astronauts. And this was mentioned if you caught the brilliant talk by Dr. Brenda Namumba. We're not astronauts, we're not space scientists, we're actually physicists. So another name for astronomy is astrophysics. And I decided in the mid-90s, when I was about 11 years old, that I wanted to be an astronomer. And this was because I saw these amazing images taken by the Hubble telescope. And in those days, in the mid-90s in South Africa, there were no role models. I didn't know any astronomers. There were very few facilities. There was no science communication like I'm doing today. There was very little public awareness of science and astronomy, even though in South Africa we had been doing Western astronomy for about 200 years. And then things started to change in the early 2000s when we in South Africa decided to build a optical telescope called the Southern African Large Telescope, or SALT, in 2002. And this is an optical telescope with the largest mirror in the Southern Hemisphere. It's about 10 or 11 meters across. And it is a really world-class instrument. And so public awareness and so on started to change about astronomy. And I was very excited because I was in my final year of high school. And this made me feel like I could actually have a job doing astronomy. So by the time I finished my BSc in 2005, SALT was actually complete. So that was really good timing. And in terms of opportunities, a really good opportunity for me to maybe, get a job and be able to do this career. And then things started to really accelerate because a few years later, South Africa decided to bid to host the SKA, and I'll talk more about the SKA in a little bit. But just to kind of finish my journey, by the time I finished my PhD in the UK in 2013, South Africa had been chosen as a joint host of the Square Kilometre Array, CAT-7, the prototype of the telescope that we want to build for SKA was complete. And I now had my PhD, so the landscape in South Africa and the opportunities that come with it had really changed, had really blossomed. And so it was a great time to be an astronomer, not just in South Africa, but in Africa in general. And so just a bit about the SKA in Africa. So South Africa was chosen as a joint host with Australia in 2012. And we very quickly decided and realized that we need to work with the rest of Africa to unlock the potential. So it's not just a benefit or a direct benefit to South Africa, but Africa in general. And we we sent out a call for interested countries, and 8 African nations decided to join us. And that's Kenya, Ghana, Mozambique, Zambia, Botswana, Namibia, Mauritius, and Madagascar. I hope I haven't left anyone out. And those countries became our SKA African Partners. And it's been really great because it allows not just South African students and South African scientists to get involved in this project to build the world's largest radio telescope, the SKA, but the rest of Africa as well. So East, Southern, and West Africa, and the island nations around the Southeast coast are all involved, and it's really great. And the number of bursaries, fellowships, and grants provided by SKA in terms of funding for students, postdoctoral fellows, even up to professor level, and they've expanded that to undergraduates as well, has gone up year on year, and over 1,000 grants, fellowships, and bursaries have been awarded by SKA over the last 15 years. And I was very lucky to be a recipient of both master's bursary and a postdoctoral fellowship from the SKA. So that was a massive opportunity for a lot of people and really changed the landscape. So I'm not sure who my audience is, if it's people who are already scientists and established, if it's students at university, undergraduate or postgraduate, or even if it's high school learners who are here to hear about opportunities. But I'm going to go through now a series of opportunities, some more for scientists and some more for the public. And you can decide what's right for you and how little or how much you want to get involved in. So a great way to get involved in astronomy around the world and in Africa is to, first of all, attend webinars like this in these constrained and challenging times now with the COVID-19 epidemic that's sweeping the globe. We have had to change a lot of the ways that we get involved in science and how we do science and how we do science communication and how we link up with each other to continue to do research and grow the interest in astronomy. And so a lot of conferences have switched to webinars like this on Facebook Live or on Twitter or on Zoom and so on. So attending webinars like this is a great start because it gets you talking to experts, interacting with them, talking to peers and so on. And so I would say this is a really good way to connect with the community. Another way to do this would be when things have settled down in terms of the COVID-19 lockdowns and pandemic and so on, is to attend public events such as NASA's Observe the Moon event, which it's an international event, and they try to get people from all over the world to observe the moon and learn more about the Earth's natural satellite, the moon. And so just basic things like that to get involved in, fun things that you can do with your friends and your family and so on. And when I make this available, you will see the link. So everything I talk about here has a link to it, so you can actually use this as a resource to refer to later on. So another way to really get involved in sciences is especially for people still at school, those still at school, or even just for fun, because sometimes I even do it, even though I am a scientist qualified and everything already, is something called citizen science. So citizen science is where you help astronomers or other scientists to do their research, because one of the nice problems we have, especially in astronomy right now, is that we don't have enough people to actually handle the data volumes that we're dealing with. And what a lot of people don't know is that computers are not nearly as good as human beings at classifying things, at looking at an image and saying, this is a cat, or this is a galaxy. And it's very easy for computers to get confused. But human beings are extremely good at recognizing shapes and patterns, and it's how we navigate our world as social beings. We know someone's face, we recognize people from a distance, and so we're very good at that. So galaxy classification is something that you can help do. And in my talk, there's a link to the SKA website where they list a whole lot of different citizen science things, from classifying galaxies to helping scientists to spot migration patterns of large mammals in the ocean like whales and so on. So there's a lot of different kinds of citizen science you can get involved in, where you can help scientists, you can work directly with them, and you do get recognition for your work if something interesting is found. So that's always great. So I want to give you a quote from Louis Pasteur, who's the person who invented pasteurization of milk, a scientist that a lot of people know of his work, maybe don't know about him, but he said, in the field of observations, chance favors the prepared mind. So it's about preparation. When an opportunity comes along, you first of all recognize that opportunity and you are prepared. So you're in the right frame of mind and the right situation to be able to take that opportunity, because a lot of times opportunities come and we either don't recognize them, or we are not prepared or able to take that opportunity. So if you, as we will say in more modern times, if you stay ready, you never have to get ready. So by making sure you think about this, you start prepping early. If you are in high school, start thinking about university. If you're in university, start thinking about what happens, or in undergrad, maybe think about postgrad, and look out for opportunities and be ready, put yourself in a good position to be able to take those opportunities. So for instance, with your studies, like I said, start prepping early. When you start engaging with looking for funding, looking for job opportunities, simple things like checking deadlines, diarizing deadlines, reading through the instructions, because often there'll be things that you have to do. Like you can't just apply for something, you also have to email a specific person to get clearance to be able to apply. There are lots of programs like that, for instance. So small things like that can trip you up. And so it's always important to be organized and prepared. And a way to make contacts with other scientists, with your colleagues, with your peers, is social media. Nowadays, scientists love being on social media. We love being on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all these kinds of things. There's a lot of YouTube channels. So this is a great way to informally follow people, ask them questions. We love answering questions. I spend a lot of time on Twitter myself. And what you can also do in terms of funding opportunities and job opportunities is to follow organizations, funding organizations and other academic institutions on social media, because they will post regularly about their funding announcements, their calls for applications, their job openings, and so on. So you can start by checking your local funding bodies. Like if you're South African, for instance, we have the National Research Foundation, or the NRF, and they regularly post updates on when it's time to apply for bursaries, etc. And so you follow them on Twitter and or on Facebook, and you get these regular updates. And that's really useful because there's a lot going on, and I've thrown a lot at you already. But if you follow NASA on social media, or you follow the NRF or your local funding body, maybe it's your university, maybe it's some other government organization, or maybe a non-government organization, you can keep up to date with that. And one other thing I would say, one other very key important piece of advice is that you be brave. And this it sounds like a trivial piece of advice, but it's really important. You need to be brave to apply to these things. I still struggle with that myself, even though I've been very fortunate to have success with applying for funding. I've just completed a Royal Society Newton International Fellowship here in the UK. I've had a Fulbright scholarship that I took up in the US just before coming to Manchester, and other bursaries and fellowships and so on. But you have to actually believe that you have what it takes to be competitive and apply. And sometimes it's as easy as, or something as simple as going to a friend, a classmate, emailing someone, and say, I'm thinking of applying for this, and just hearing them say, you got this, you can absolutely do this. So you just need that bravery, you need that confidence, and it's not easy, but it's like with a lot of things in life, practice makes perfect. Once you start doing it, it becomes a habit, but you need to have that first step of bravery to be able to say, I'm going to apply for this. And if it's not successful, oftentimes you can email a follow-up and say, can you give me some feedback or advice? And then that can help you going forward. And to be brave again, one thing I like to do is when something is successful, even if it's just something small, like a letter of recommendation or an award that I got, when I'm feeling a bit down and I know I have to do something, I have to apply for a bit of funding or I have to apply for a job, I go back and I read over maybe a letter from a teacher or something nice that someone said in an email, and I read that, and then I say to myself, well, I was this brave person once, and someone saw that I have what it takes. Let me just remind myself that I have the ability, I'm ready, and I can apply, and I'm going to be brave and apply again, even though it might not work out. So another thing that you can do in your preparedness and your bravery setup is to take up training opportunities at your institution. For instance, at a lot of universities, they have speaker training. You can attend things like hacks where you learn computer skills and coding skills, writing courses or online courses if your particular institution doesn't have that. There's a lot of free online courses, webinars, and so on that you can get useful skills in. And so search for free online courses that you can do where you can pick up or improve your skills or learn a new skill. And again, you need to be brave to do that. I know myself, when I'm faced with something that's a bit out of my comfort zone, I get a bit anxious. I start to say to myself, do I really need to learn this skill? And then again, I just think about my bravery mindset. I go back and say, well, you managed to do X, Y, or Z very recently, and it went pretty well. So, let's take that leap into this unknown thing, and we'll be able to go forward and learn a new skill. So I will come to academic opportunities in a moment, but I just want to highlight, so this is something again that Dr. Brenda touched on. She mentioned me, non-academic opportunities. So if you're already a scientist, or you're, say, a postgrad student, and maybe you make the decision that you don't want to be a professor, you don't want to be a lecturer. That's personally a decision that I made. I made a decision after my last postdoctoral fellowship that I don't want to be a professor. I don't want to stay in the strict academic environment. There are lots of other jobs that you can go into. I personally chose science communication, and I'll talk a bit more about my company that I started after this. So maybe if you have a gift for communicating with the public, or you're really good at explaining complicated things in a non-complicated way, that's something you could look into. And there's lots of other careers like teaching. Data science is a big area that's hiring now, and it's one of those jobs that 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, data science wasn't a job. It wasn't a thing. There was no such thing as data scientists. There are people working with data, but they weren't called that. And we weren't working with these huge data sets, this big data. That's this big buzzword that everyone's using, especially in astronomy with Meerkat and ASCAP, which are the SKA precursors, because what new telescopes really are big data generators. So we have these experience with data science and data analysts and analytics and all this kind of stuff. So there's all sorts of other jobs for astronomers. And depending on where you are in the world, there are traditional corporations like banks and so on who will hire people with a STEM background, because they know that we know computer coding, they know that we know a lot of maths, statistics, and so on. And so I have a link in my talk where, just as a start, something called Jobs for Astronomers /careers. And there's a lot of different careers that you can go into. One tip I will give you is to, if you're thinking of leaving academia after your science qualification, look for non-traditional companies like startups, because tech startups are often started by people who decide not to finish their PhD, or after their PhD decide to start their own smaller company. And these smaller tech startups are more in tune with our skill set and the kind of people we are and the kind of training that academia gives you. And so you might have an easier time integrating into that kind of company rather than going to a big traditional corporate. So just a bit about my company, AstroComms. AstroComms was started after many years of thinking about it and many years of doing science communication in various forms. So I started my own company, and the tagline for AstroComms is knowledge stems from communication. So it's a STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and maths, communications and consulting company. And you can follow us at astro_comms with 2 M's. And the idea is that I help, or that AstroComms helps STEM practitioners to make their work more accessible to a wider audience. So that could be anything from policymakers to funding bodies to a general audience of non-experts. So everywhere from primary school all the way up to university. And we provide speaker training, we provide other communications training, social media and digital media strategy. We also do diversity and inclusion, or transformation as we call it in South Africa, support. So if you are an organization and you want to attract and support more underrepresented people in your workplace, then we can help you change your culture so that your workplace is more accommodating, and so on. So it's a really fun venture. My favorite thing that I've done so far with AstroComms is to be a technical advisor for scriptwriters. So traditionally, people who come from a humanities background, the kind of people who work in creative industries, don't have a science background or a technical background in STEM. And if you're writing a science fiction show, for instance, you need a little bit of real science in there. So I've been hired a few times now by scriptwriters to work with them and put the science into their science fiction. And it's really fun because you get to be creative, you get to meet people who think very differently than from scientists, and make new connections. And I really, really enjoy that aspect of my work. So lastly, the slides that I'll put up, I have a list of resources for opportunities of funding, for looking for jobs, etc. And you can look through that yourself and see what you are interested in. Maybe you'll explore some things that are new to you. For instance, there's something called the Office of Astronomy for Development, and it was set up by the International Astronomical Union. The head office is in Cape Town in South Africa, and there are other regional offices around the world. And so this idea that you leverage astronomy and people's interest in space and the sky and aliens and all that stuff, and you use that as a development tool to get them to engage with science in a way that's fun and interesting and accessible to a lot more people. So if that's something you're interested in helping your community, for instance, you can have a look at the OSWD's website that I've listed here. So I've left plenty of time for questions. That's sort of the end of my formal presentation, but I've left plenty of time for questions because I really feel that this is an opportunity for you to ask questions. So if we can maybe start highlighting some questions, or someone can type something, I can have a scroll through and have a look and see. Thanks everyone for signing in. So if anyone has specific questions, maybe about my career path, the subjects I studied, and so on, or if you follow me on Twitter at Tana Joseph, I'm happy to answer questions on there as well. I spend a lot of time on Twitter, and I'm always happy to engage with people and point them in the right direction for, resources or people to talk to or things to get involved in. So, anyone have any pressing questions that they want to get into right now? Okay. So some questions have been dropped above. Hi, everyone. Let's see. So there's a question here, but I don't think it's directed at me. So someone's asking, are you planning on starting a STEM career? So just in general, a question that a lot of people have is, do I have to be a super genius to be a scientist or an engineer or get involved in technology or mathematics? And the answer is no. So one of the things that is actually very damaging to getting people, very prohibitive for getting people into STEM careers, is this idea that you have to be a lone genius, that you have to have all this maths in your brain and be able to do calculus just like that and know how to code. You just that has to flow through you, or it's your destiny or your calling, and you work by yourself and you make these amazing discoveries. And that is actually very far from the truth. When you speak to a lot of scientists who are successful in their jobs, a lot of them will say, I struggled with maths in undergrad. I did as well in second year. I decided to do my second year modules over 2 years into my third year because I was struggling a bit with the calculus and with the linear algebra. And that's normal and nothing to be ashamed of. Being a scientist is more about being curious, being determined, and wanting to ask questions and solve problems in a systematic way, but also in a creative way. And also working with people. You need to really be able to work with people and get on with them and get the best out of other people and the best out of yourself in a group setting. It's all about collaborating. And that's something that a lot of people don't realize when they think of scientists. They think of people who don't, who are shy or nervous around people, but you end up working in big collaborations, and there'll be subgroups in that. And sometimes you find yourself, even as a student, being a subject matter expert. So for instance, one of my latest collaborations is with a big group in Australia. I've never met any of them. I only communicate with them via email and our monthly Zoom meetings. And they asked me to head up this big paper, and I had to wrangle over 50 people writing this paper together, all giving their input. So you have to have good people management skills. And one of the people who became an expert and did a lot of good work on this paper was actually one of our PhD students at the University of Manchester. And that's because she was learning to do some coding in working with big data sets, and I hadn't learned to do that. And we realized it would be faster for her to be the subject matter expert on this than for me, even though I'm the lead coordinator on this work. And so she had to take over the technical side. So at any point you can be called up to be a leader or to delegate, and you have to be humble enough if you're more senior to to be able to say, I don't know enough. And that's a very powerful thing to be able to recognize and say as a scientist or as a researcher in STEM, is to say, I don't know, let me find someone else who does know. And if that person is more junior, then you be humble enough to accept that you don't know everything and they know more than you. And also as a junior person, be, again, the bravery mindset, come back to that. Be brave enough to step up and say, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I know my stuff, and let's work together to get this work done. So here's a question from Lily Asongfa. I'm sorry if I said that incorrectly. Hi Lily, thanks for your question. I see you are an engineering student specializing in telecommunications engineering, and you've developed an interest in aerospace, and you'd like to do a master's in satellite engineering and get involved with space to develop Africa. And the question is, what advice would you give me on how to go about my preparation for the astro field and how to get into the right schools? I'm a Cameroonian, and we don't have any schools where I can do my master's, so I'm out looking for scholarships. Please advise. So Lily, first of all, welcome. Thank you for your question. So this is a good example of someone who is still in undergrad, thinking and preparing about going forward. You've recognized that the resources to help you achieve your dream are not necessarily available locally. And so one thing I would say is that you need to take the next step and maybe go on Twitter or you're on Facebook or do a bit of Googling to see if anyone from your country has gone on to do this kind of work, this kind of STEM work. I know a couple of people from Cameroon who are, I think one of them studying in Canada at the moment. It's in astronomy. It's not in engineering, but perhaps they can help. They, I know this person because their PhD advisor was a classmate of mine. So perhaps I can put you in contact with them if you drop me a message here on Facebook or if you find me on Twitter at Tana Joseph. You can send me a message to remind me and I can put you in touch with this person, and then maybe they can give you some specific advice that's more appropriate because it's local to Cameroonians. I would also just say, get on social media, start following organizations like the OSWD, which is the Organization for Women in Science for the Developing World. And they specifically like to fund PhDs and so on, and master's programs and fellowships for women in science. And I guess engineering would also fall under that in the developing world. So there's one organization that you can look into. So thanks, Amanda, for posting that. And absolutely, this for everyone's, my Twitter is open for people to message. Well, my DMs aren't open, but you can tweet me and I'll tweet back. I really love interacting with especially young African STEM practitioners, up and coming. And even if you're in school still, it's never too early to start planning and thinking and exploring all the opportunities that are out there. So I would say, the OSWD is a good place to start, Lily. And if you're going to go on Twitter anyway, then start following other African researchers and, get involved in the community, ask questions, be brave, put yourself out there and, get your name out there, because how a lot of this works, and people, again, something people don't realize about science is it is about who you know. It's about what you know. Of course, you must have qualifications, but it's about getting your name out there. It's about networking, just like it is in the corporate world. Because if the right people know you when an opportunity comes up, we can say, aha, I know someone who's interested in that. Lily said she's interested in this kind of aerospace engineering. I see this opportunity here. Let me DM her and send her this, and maybe she can apply for it. And maybe I can even help her with the application. So you have to know the right people, be in the right place at the right time. Like Louis Pasteur said, fortune favors the prepared mind. So if you make these preparations now and make these connections now, you'll be in the right space, know the right people, be in the right frame of mind to be able to accept these opportunities and make the most of them when they do come. So do we have another question? Hi, Brenda, I see you in the comment section. That's great. Do we have any other scholarships questions, or if you are from one of the SKA partner countries, so like we said, Kenya, Ghana, Zambia, Namibia, Botswana, Mozambique, Mauritius, and Madagascar, then you should definitely follow SKA South Africa or SKA Africa. Check their website regularly, because there are special opportunities for you to get involved in, to get bursaries, to get involved in, say for instance, big data schools where you do big data challenges and learn computing skills around big data, and that's very applicable and very sought after right now all over the world, not just in astronomy, in things like bioinformatics, and of course in the corporate world. So basic education requirements. Thank you, Aya, for asking that question. So again, one thing that we need to understand about astronomy, I mentioned briefly physics. Astronomy is a branch of physics, and engineering, you can think of engineering as applied physics. So with engineering, you know the physics, and then you use what you know about physical properties of, say, materials or electricity or electrodynamics or whatever, and you apply that to make something useful or make something that works. And astronomy is applying the laws of physics to try and understand how a star works or how planets are formed. So what you need more than anything else, you don't need a background in astronomy, you need a physics background, and with that will come the required maths, because the language of science is mathematics. So for me personally, I'll post my slides at the end of this. For me personally, at high school, I did physics and chemistry, because in South Africa, you had to do both. And I did mathematics all the way through to the end of high school. And then my undergraduate degrees were in physics, not in astronomy. I maybe did 1 or 2 astronomy electives, and I know that astronomy electives are not always available at all institutions. And that's absolutely fine, because like I said, astronomy is just applied as a special branch of physics, just like nuclear physics or particle physics or materials physics. It all boils down to the same things. You're going to need a background in quantum mechanics, electrodynamics, those core things. Classical mechanics is obviously very useful in astronomy settings. So as long as you have a good grounding in physics, you can then later at the postgraduate level switch to astronomy. You don't have to know astronomy, certainly not in high school, not even in your undergraduate studies, as long as you have a good physics degree. And the same for engineering. You're going to do a lot of maths and you're going to do a lot of physics. The physics will be slightly different, but the idea is that that these are all branches from physical sciences, and that's your main thing that you're going to need. And like I said, the maths will come with that, and you can pick up applied maths later, and you can pick up the stats that you need later. But physics and maths are the 2 core subjects that you need from high school already. So you don't have, for the follow-up with Aya, you don't have to have an astronomy background when right from the start. So you would normally switch at the postgraduate level. Once you have your undergraduate degree in physics, you can switch over to an astronomy degree. So so don't panic if you don't have that specific subset of physics knowledge right now. So do we have any other questions? We still have some time, and like I said, you can follow me here on Facebook, or you can jump over to Twitter and chat to me. This video will go up, and I will post. I'll post my presentation, which unfortunately I don't know why it's not allowing me to share the screen. I'm really sorry about that. Thank you all for listening. We've still got some time for questions, so please be brave. And there are no stupid questions, there are no dumb questions, there are no trivial questions. You can ask me what's my favorite thing to study, or why did I choose my particular course of study, what my favorite subject was, what my most difficult subject was. It was electrodynamics. It was really difficult for me. Anything you want to ask regarding my career or my career path, what I'm choosing to do next, we still have loads of time, and I'd love to hear from you, hear your thoughts. If you have any suggestions, now's your chance. How do you start your STEM career? So we've kind of talked about that. So the science, technology, engineering, and maths basically comes down to you knowing physics and knowing your maths, and those are the basic requirements to get involved. It depends also on your particular brand of STEM. So if you're involved with technology, you might not have necessarily like a physics background, but maybe you do something like computer science, and with that you'll need to know at least some kind of algebra, linear algebra, matrix mechanics, and all that kind of stuff. So if you're more on the technology side or more on the computer science side, then but even to get into computer science as an undergraduate, you still need to definitely have mathematics and physical sciences will probably help you a lot as well, because it's the thing about science and doing mathematics and all of that is it teaches you a way to think, to solve problems systematically, but you don't have to be, what's great about STEM is that you don't have to rigidly stick to that. There's actually so much scope for creativity in STEM subjects. And one thing I will also really encourage, we're trying to change the way, like I said earlier on, change the way we think of what a scientist is, what a mathematician is, like who they are and how they operate. And I would urge those in undergrad already, and even those in high school, to also think about maybe doing some kind of humanities course like sociology or anthropology or something. It's very important because, especially in the African context, as Africans, we know what it's like when people come without knowing our cultural norms, without understanding our background and our communities, and they come in and they try and apply some kind of high-tech solution that worked in some other country, and they try to come to our particular African country or our location, and they try and force their way of doing things onto us. And as scientists, as STEM practitioners, especially in the technology sector, we must be very careful about being sensitive to applying things that don't belong in certain contexts. Just because you have a brilliant idea doesn't mean it's always going to work. And you always need to understand that as a scientist, as a STEM practitioner, as a technologist, that your solutions need to be people-centric. And we mustn't lose sight of that. Especially as Africans, we value our community, we value our family, we value our extended family in a way that other cultures maybe don't, or they don't do it in exactly the same way as us. And so you have to bring your humanity with your technical know-how. And a lot of scientists lose sight of that, even African scientists. So I would say for the new generation of STEM practitioners like you all, think about doing a humanities course, the history of science or the history of astronomy. Think about who traditionally gets to be an astronomer or a scientist or an engineer, and how you can change that. You're already being brave and having these ideas and having these careers and doing these studies. But don't forget who you are first and foremost as well. You are yourself. You are part of a family. You're part of a culture. You're part of a country. You're part of a continent that is so special and unique. And you need to be able to do your science in context and do your technology or whatever in context in a way that can uplift and benefit the people of our continent. So that we don't get outsiders always coming in and trying to interfere and impose their ways. And so it's always important to remember that you can be a scientist, but you're not a robot. You're a person. And especially if you want to do something that has applications to help the community, then that's something that's very important to keep not in the back of your mind, at the forefront of your mind. And I'll give you a practical example, because I've just kind of waffled a lot there. I'll give you a practical example of this situation that can cause problems. There's a certain person, a billionaire, who is from South Africa originally and now works in the US, and they've launched a whole bunch of satellites into space that is interfering. It's called Starlink, and it's really interfering with astronomy, because one of the great things about many locations in Africa is that we have these wide open spaces and these dark skies. So that's part of the reason that SKA chose South Africa, and we can choose these other African partners to put our telescopes in it, like SALT and so on. And Namibia's is just building a new telescope as well to become part of the Event Horizon telescope that's imaging black holes. So Africa is a really good place to do that, but it's dependent on these dark, quiet, open spaces where you don't have a lot of interference from light pollution or radio frequency interference and so on. And so this Starlink, this fleet of satellites, has been put into orbit, and it's causing a lot of problems for astronomers. And this tech billionaire said, well, we're going to use, astronomers must shut up, and astronomy is not that important. We're going to use these Starlink satellites to give Africans the internet and internet access. And it's such an arrogant thing to say, because as far as I'm aware, Africans weren't consulted. This person just came in and said, "Oh, poor Africans, you have nothing, you have no connectivity. Let me do this invasive thing and use you as an excuse, so that people can't say this is a bad idea or this project wasn't well thought through, because then you'll just say, well, I'm helping Africans, and so that's really important, and then everyone just has to shut up because you don't want to be seen not to be helping Africans." But actually, what should have happened is that he should have consulted with governments, with organizations, all the way down to people on the ground to say, do you need internet in this particular way? Is there another way that you can provide internet or mobile connectivity to Africans, in particular areas, to Southern Africans, to Western Africans, to Sub-Saharan Africans? Because Africa is the second largest landmass on the planet. You can't just say Africans like that, and as if we're one country and all one people in a very homogenous way. So this is an example of someone coming in trying to force their solutions on us, when in actual fact, there are many of us who have thought about this much longer and are more aware of and in tune with the needs of various countries on the continent, various communities on the continent, and how to best implement things. And so that kind of arrogance and interference is something that we need to move away from and center ourselves as people of the continent to, solve our own problems, empower ourselves and solve our own problems. So, here's a nice, interesting question. Share some insights on the link between astronomy, astrophysics, and cosmology. So basically, those are astronomy and astrophysics are the same thing. In the US, they tend to use the word astrophysics more. In the old days, astronomy used to be more like looking through telescopes, and astrophysics was like on the computer doing calculations. But now everyone has to write computer code. Everyone has to use telescopes in some way. I personally have never looked through a telescope. I've never gone to a telescope to observe because I don't enjoy that. Telescopes are in faraway places in the middle of nowhere, and I like cities. I'm a big city girl, and so I don't like going to those places. So I use telescopes that are in space, so I never have to do that. So astronomy and astrophysics is two different names for the same thing. Like I said, in the US, they would use astrophysics in at least in South Africa, and from what I've seen in Europe, we use astronomy to describe what we do, but they're the same thing. Cosmology is just a branch of astronomy or branch of astrophysics where you look at the universe as a whole, and especially the beginning of the universe. So you look at the content of the universe and see how it's changing. So dark energy, what is dark energy, dark matter content, and how that influences the parts of the universe that we can actually see. So they're all just, the two of them are named for the same thing, and cosmology is just a branch of astronomy or astrophysics that deals with looking at the universe as a whole, and especially the young universe. So there was a question here about how astronomy opportunities or international opportunity or local opportunities for students in high school and up to 25 years old, so 14 to 25. So when I post my PowerPoint presentation, there'll be links to things, like I said, like NASA's public events. Follow organizations like STEMi Africa Makers and OSWD and so on, because they post a lot of things that are more local and organized by local people, and that you can get involved in. Obviously, right now with the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of this is online, so that is an issue for a lot of people. But those who do have online connectivity can use this opportunity to engage with online resources and events, and then you can start planning your own event and make it more local when the time comes when we are able to socialize again. Okay, great. Thanks so much. This was really lovely. Again, I apologize about not being able to share my screen, but I will make the slides available as soon as possible. Thank you all. Goodbye.